Welcome, everybody. We want to thank you for joining us for another episode of the Journey to Thrive podcast. I'm your host today, Deacon Jim Friend, and I'm the Director of Mission Advancement for the Saint John Vianney Center. Our podcast is produced by the Saint John Vianney Center, and if you like this content, we hope you're going to stick around and subscribe. You can follow us on Facebook, Instagram, LinkedIn, and X. And remember, you can listen to this episode wherever you download your favorite podcasts. If you're watching us on YouTube, give us a like because it really helps us to push this content out to other people. We'll also leave links in the show notes of this episode to our guests today and to our website. We invited Sister Mercedes McCann, who serves in leadership relations in our Consultation, Education, and Outreach Department, also known as our CEO department, to join us on our podcast today because Sister is one of those individuals that we'll be honoring at our upcoming 80th anniversary breakfast on May the 8th. Along with Sister Mercedes, we'll also be recognizing our board chair, Al Riviezo, who, by the way, joined me on our podcast a couple of episodes ago. We'll also be honoring Archbishop William Laurie of the Archdiocese of Baltimore and Sister Mary Ellen Tennedy of the Sisters Servants of the Immaculate Heart of Mary. At the breakfast, Sister Mercedes will be receiving the inaugural Outstanding Service Award in recognition of her decades of service to Saint John Vianney Center. I think you're going to really enjoy this conversation with Sister because she shares some insights about the connection between faith and mental health, and she reflects on the challenges that many religious communities are facing today. Let me share with you a little bit more about Sister Mercedes. Sister Mercedes McCann is a beloved member of the staff of Saint John Vianney Center and a Sister of Mercy of the Americas. She has a doctorate in clinical psychology. She has dedicated decades of her life to blending deep psychological expertise with compassionate ministry. For 15 years, she served as a psychotherapist in our inpatient program for clergy and religious. In her current role in leadership relations, she acts as a trusted liaison to religious communities, especially women's religious communities, offering consultation, education, and facilitation on topics from boundaries and emotional development to the spirituality of aging. Her experience spans special education, formation ministry, and international speaking across the Americas, Europe, and the Pacific Rim. Sister Mercedes brings profound wisdom to the vital intersection of mental health, community life, and spirituality in consecrated life. And now, without further ado, here's my conversation with Sister Mercedes McCann. Well, welcome to our podcast, Sister. It's great to have you here today.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here as well.
Well, we've actually, now that I think about it, we've had you on the podcast several times, just not in this interview format. You've done a number of talks for Saint John Vianney Center that we've recorded and shared as part of our podcast over the years. So it's great to have this opportunity to sit down and learn a little bit more about your background and your ministry and the work that you've done at Saint John Vianney. But maybe we'll just start with you've had such an incredible journey in ministry from special education in the Archdiocese of Philadelphia, your formation work in the Sisters of Mercy. But let's maybe start back at the beginning. What initially drew you to religious life with the Sisters of Mercy, and how did that calling kind of intersect with your interest in psychology and mental health?
Well, I had an aunt in the community, so I was familiar with the community, although, at the time I was a child, we saw her maybe once or twice a year. So I didn't have a whole lot of consistent experience of her, but I had the Sisters of Mercy in grammar school and again in high school. So I knew them very well from that. And I grew up in what I like to call a Bells of St. Mary's parish. We had a lot of contact with the sisters and the priests, and it was just a wonderful parish to grow up in. So I got to know the sisters on many levels, not only in the classroom, but also, they would be out on the playground with us. We would be invited to the convent if we were in trouble. So I had several times I had that invitation extended to me. But I always found the sisters to be compassionate, to be fair, to be very interested in who you were as a person. And they just instilled, a great love in us. When I was in high school, I went to a diocesan high school. So we had four communities actually that served that high school. But the Sisters of Mercy were one of those four communities. So my experience in grammar school it just got extended when I got to high school. And in fact, I'd have to say my experience in grammar school was such a positive experience, not only for me, but for my classmates as well. 3 of us from the one class in grammar school entered the community. And there's a group of us who gather every 3 months for lunch, organized by the guys, not by the 3 of us, or there's another lay woman who joins us. There are about 10 of us all together, 6 men and 4 women. And invariably, the conversation goes back to the Sisters of Mercy and what a wonderful, wonderful experience we had. So it goes all the way back that far. I'd say we take a 4th vow, the vow of service to the poor, the sick, and the ignorant. And so having also that, seeing that our service was oftentimes devoted to those who were least able themselves. And that was another thing that was very attractive to me, which also then led me into special education.
Wow. I'm curious, did your family play a role? It sounds like you had a relative who's in the order, but did your family play a role in your discernment process?
Oh, absolutely. It's not like we sat down and discerned together. My parents wouldn't have known. They wouldn't have known the meaning of that word. They would say go, and we would go, and stay, and we would stay. There wasn't a lot of discernment that I could see anyway. But I also had 2 uncles who were priests. So, and had a wonderful, wonderful experience of life with those 2 men. So I think all the way around, I grew up in a very faith-filled family. Not real ostentatious. We of course went to mass every Sunday. We said grace before meals every night. I don't know that we ever said grace after meals. That sort of fell by the wayside.
Right.
But definitely the faith was a major part of my growing up experience, and in a very healthy way. It was not an experience of being forced to do anything. It was simply love of God that permeated my whole family experience. We gathered together every Sunday at one of my 2 grandparents' homes, the one where my 2 uncles were priests. They were certainly a part of that gathering. It was a big gathering of the aunts, uncles, cousins every other week at that house. So I had a lot of experience of that faith-filled love of God, love of neighbor, appreciation of family.
That's wonderful. And obviously that readied you to hear God's call and have those deeper discussions when you met the Sisters of Mercy and were welcomed by that community. That's
absolutely.
So before you came to Saint John Vianney Center many moons ago, I know you ministered in other state behavioral health institutions, and you also served as a formation minister. How do those experiences kind of shape your understanding of the connection between mental health and spiritual life?
Well, that's one of my main interests, and always has been. Like, where's that intersection? And I think that a really deep and robust spiritual life is important for everything, but it's very important for good mental health, and beginning with appreciating the love of God for us, and how God only wants the best for us. God wants us to be happy in the way God is happy. So that permeated all of those ministries. The other thing that I am particularly interested in is the vulnerable in this world. And so, of course, working in special education, I worked with the most vulnerable of God's children, and could not begin to repay the graces that I received working with those children. I have always said I got far more than I ever gave in that particular ministry. But then when I came to Saint John Vianney Center, a different kind of vulnerability, and certainly being touched by the people whom I've met there, watching them get in touch with their vulnerability has helped me to examine my own. And, I always say we all make mistakes. Some of us are just lucky enough to have them not become public. And so at some level, we're all vulnerable, and tapping into that is a very important piece.
Yeah, it's interesting. When I served in the Diocese of Allentown, it was about 12 years ago now, I worked with our 3 schools of special education. And as you probably know, Allentown used to be part of the Archdiocese of Philadelphia. And that's a unique ministry that's indicative to Philadelphia and Allentown, having those schools of Catholic schools of special education and ministry. So I learned a lot just from working with those teachers and principals and the parents. Just my role was to help them raise funds and get the word out, but you still learn so much, and always just in awe of these parents and these teachers who do amazing jobs in helping these children reach their full potential.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Yeah. I always say when I die, I think those are the people who are going to push me and pull me into heaven. Yeah. That's my golden key.
That's awesome. So, as a clinical psychologist, you spent years as a therapist, and going back to the beginning, when you first started working with men and women, religious and clergy, as a therapist, were there a lot of folks doing it at that time? I'm just curious, when you started, was that something that you had a lot of other colleagues doing something similar, or was that a unique ministry?
Well, in the field of psychology, in the field in general, it probably would be considered a very unique niche. Most people, I did my internship at a state institution in the state of New Jersey. Most people wouldn't even have known what I was talking about, much less what I wound up doing. So I would say it's unique in that way. Over the years, there have been maybe 4 or 5 institutions across the United States and Canada that have been devoted to service of priests and religious and good mental health. So, but it still is a very small community, so to speak. When I first came to Saint John's, I would say the staff and clinicians there probably were a third the size that they are now. I think I was one of 3 psychologists, clinical psychologists, and I think there are 7 or 8 now, which is a wonderful thing because the population isn't all that much larger, but the need is that much greater. So it's a very good thing. And I also think, perhaps without knowing it, we bring not only a unique perspective within Saint John Vianney Center, but as a religious psychologist, we bring a unique perspective no matter where we are. I mean, I had an interesting experience when I worked at Trenton Psychiatric Hospital, which was the state hospital that I interned in. And I was there for a year. I didn't wear a habit. I did not say that I was a religious. Sometimes that, especially in an institution such as that can be a liability. So, only the people that I directly reported to knew that. But when I was leaving, I went around to the different units where I had worked, and there was a woman who worked on one of those units. And when I was telling her I was leaving, she said, I'll bet your husband's going to be very happy that you're finished here, because the hours you put in were unbelievable. And I started to laugh, and I said, well, actually, I don't have a husband. And I explained to her that I was a religious, and I said a nun, because that's how most people relate to it. And she looked at me for a minute and she said, I have known all year long that there was something different about you. I felt so complimented, because I thought, it doesn't come from what I wore. It doesn't come from religious symbols. It came out of who I was as a person. And so I felt that God's grace shines through, and that being that psychologist in whatever venue you are, if you're an authentically good religious person, it will come through.
And I'm sure, you spent 15 years as a psychotherapist here before you went into the work you're doing now. I would imagine that the clergy and the men and women religious could be a sense of relief to know that not only are they speaking to a qualified therapist, obviously, but someone with your background, with your vocation, that would bring a certain warmth and comfort and openness. Did you find that?
Yes, I do. I don't find, I can't, I really can't offhand think of any time where I found that somebody was resistant because I was a religious, or even resistant because I was a woman. Some people prefer by gender who they're going to have as a therapist, and we don't follow that at St. John's. But I did not find any resistance, even because I was a religious. Often everybody hasn't had the most positive experience of sisters
Right.
in their grade school and high school careers. So some people come with a certain degree of prejudice, but I can't say that it was ever something that was overt or anything like that. For the most part, I would say mostly people say, "Oh, she gets it." That would be the relief that you would hear. And oftentimes when people leave St. John's, their first preference to have a therapist ongoing would be either a priest or a woman religious. And again, it's a small population. So oftentimes that's not possible, but, and that's not to preclude the wonderful lay people who are on staff that also influence the lives of all of the clients that we have, the residents that we have at St.
Of course. Yeah. But it's you bring something very special to it, I'm sure. And they recognize that. And so, yeah, absolutely. For you, what was when you were doing dedicated inpatient work here at the center, what was maybe one of the more rewarding aspects of that work for you?
Well, I'll go all the way back to Freud and Jung, who of course had a falling out over the topic of religion. I mean, Jung, thought that was very important, and Freud thought that it was positively ridiculous. But over the lintel of his door in his home in Switzerland, he was carved in Latin, "Bidden or not bidden, God is present." And that's also the epitaph on his gravestone, where he's buried. And so for me, and I had it in Latin in my office, but I also had another engraving of it in English. For me, that was a very important thing to remember, that I don't have to be overtly religious in order for somebody to get it. It's God's grace, and God is present through everything that happens in that building. I believe God's grace is present for that. So that always stays in my head, bidden or not bidden, God is present. And you can see that grace working in a person, from the time they first come to St. John's to the time they're discharged. And that is the most rewarding experience, to see someone being able to put their life back together again in a very healthy way with God's help, and go on and hopefully continue to live a very healthy religious or priestly life. That is the most rewarding experience.
And it gets multiplied out too by the number of people that they will then serve, because they are healthy and happy in their ministry. They can go out and do God's work and serve others too. So It's such a special vocation that you have.
Absolutely.
So switching gears a little bit, fast forwarding the clock and kind of getting into some of the work that you do now. I know you facilitate a number of groups internationally, around the country, certainly on a regular basis. And you do a lot of different topics like boundaries, emotional development, change and transition, in religious life, even especially even as sisters and brothers and sisters look to move out of active ministry and the spirituality of aging. I'm sure you've gained a lot of insights just working with these religious communities. Can you share a little bit about what you've learned, especially in recent years, kind of as to where we are with our religious communities and the work that we're doing?
I guess one of the major insights that I've gained that I wouldn't have known otherwise is that I've done a bit of work with religious communities that are coming to completion, which is the term that's used by LCWR for communities that are not going to be in existence in the next 5 or 10 years. I personally don't like the phrase coming to completion, but they didn't ask me when they were forming it. So initially they said coming to fulfillment, and I like that much better.
I like that.
Because I don't believe, even when the community no longer exists in person, the legacy that they have left keeps going on and on and on.
Absolutely.
So working with those communities has been, it's been very, very rewarding and enlightening for me. I hear no lamentation whatsoever. I see a desire to move into the future, whatever God holds for them personally, whatever God holds for the community, living day by day, walking into that future with all of the hope that you can imagine, and really hope, not optimism, not, oh, well, maybe a miracle will happen and we'll have, a half a dozen women enter, not that kind of thing. It's the hope that this is where God is leading, and God will provide for us and for the church as we move through that. I can't tell you how touched I am by that, really, because the Sisters of Mercy are a very large community. So what's in our future, I don't know, but I'll be buried at the cemetery for the Sisters of Mercy. So I don't think I have to worry about that immediately. But when I see these sisters and I see what they have to offer, I'm very, very much touched by that. So I would say that's been one of my biggest learnings. And I think of, we have nothing to fear. Do not fear. The Lord is with us.
That's beautiful. That's beautiful. And I know, so in the work that you do now for us through the Consultation, Education, and Outreach Department, you're kind of you're our liaison in religious life, and you work with a number of real special focus on women religious. So, as we look at, the landscape of where we're at now, why do you see that this outreach to our leadership in women religious communities is so vital, and how are we helping to support their overall well-being?
Well, I think in this day and age, we live in a very complicated world, and there's so many things conflicting that affect all of us as individuals. But we're not abstinent of that, inflicting maybe some of that conflict within religious life, and so it takes a toll on people. Anxiety can be rife in people. The whole I was working partially in the CEO division at the beginning of COVID, and the kind of fear and anxiety that religious communities, religious leaders were anticipating or seeing actually within their communities over that whole issue was really, I think, having the support for them over something they never expected to have to deal with. It was never on any of our radar screens, really. Good. So offering that kind of support to leadership, you're doing fine, you're doing the right thing. This is how you might support people further. All of that, I think, was very, very helpful to the women who were in leadership at that particular time. But I also think in the time where we live now, we live in a very anxious age. And it comes out in all different ways. It comes out in personality dips. It comes out in certainly in depression, anxiety itself, fears, that kind of thing. I think being a support to those women religious in leadership and encouraging them to, you're doing the best you can, and you are doing well by the women that you're leading, or the men. I've done some of this work with men's religious communities as well. So I think that support is, it is probably the most important thing that we do. We don't perform miracles. We can't change your problems. We can't,
Right.
That's just not a possibility, but we can be supportive of people. And leadership can be a very lonely vocation, if you will, or avocation within religious life or in any life, really. So I think just to be there to support those people is very, very important.
Yeah, it's been described to me, whether it's man or woman religious, or even like a position like vicar for clergy in a diocese. You go from being one of the boys, one of the gals, to now you're kind of first among equals, or you're now in charge. So it can be isolating, I would imagine, to be moving in that position, and you don't always necessarily have the training to step up into that role. It's just, here we are. No, let's run with it. So.
Exactly. And membership doesn't always understand why there has to be a shift in relationship. Like, your best friend, you could go out for dinner with your best friend and you could, complain and kvetch about whatever you wanted to. And then you would leave and that'd be fine. You got it off your chest and they were there to listen. You can't do that when you're in leadership. And so I think sometimes best friends, if you will, don't understand the shift in relationship that has to take place. So that, again, can feel isolating, but for both sides, for someone in membership, but also for somebody in leadership as well.
Yeah, for sure. As you think about the places that you worked with, the different communities around the country, and I know you have a kind of a special interest with the intersection of spirituality and ministry, community life, good mental health, all those factors as you have done these gatherings and given talks. Can you share kind of an example of how you've seen these elements kind of come together, whether it's in an individual or maybe a community that is working differently now, maybe because of the coaching or something new that they picked up and now they're heading in a more positive direction?
Well, this would be a pretty blatant illustration, actually. I spent almost 2 weeks in Africa in the fall. I'm on the board of an organization called the All African Sisters Conference, Sister to Sister. And it actually was begun by a Sister of Mercy 25 years ago, and she's still alive, although she is not active any longer. But what we do is, or what the organization does, is try to link up the rich with the poor in terms of African nations that don't have 1/1000 of the availabilities that we would have in the United States. So anyway, I spent 10 days to 2 weeks over there just in the country of Uganda. Wow. But we serve in, I think it's 6 different African countries. So the women who are representatives of each of those communities had all gathered together. So we probably met with about 60 women. And it was interesting to me because, first of all, the culture is so different. Second of all, similar to ourselves here in the United States, the cultures among the different countries are also very different. I tend to look at the continent of Africa and think, oh, well, everybody's pretty much the same. No more so than we are here in the United States. Prayer, their prayer was so similar in many ways to the way we pray in religious communities in the United States. Their enjoyment of each other at the end of the meal. Now, most of these women, I think almost all of them, wear habits all the time. But the last night that we were there, they had a party and everybody was gathered together and they all came in their native costume and had a blast. I mean, danced, sang, told stories about their communities. The stories all have the same themes across the world at this point, because I've been on 6 of the 7 continents. And aside from the penguins, I don't think there are any religious on the continent of Antarctica. So when I say the stories are the same, they're the same across 6 continents. The yearnings for being participative in the church, the yearnings for spreading the faith, the same. And so they of course take a different characteristics, but nevertheless they are the same. So I would say that was one of the biggest learnings that that I saw. And of course, these are all African communities. So these are all African women in those communities. And honestly, it wasn't, I don't know how this could have happened, but it did. It wasn't until I got home and started to look at pictures and I thought, oh my goodness, the three of us were the only white women there. And no sense of that. Well, no sense whatsoever.
How beautiful.
Yeah, right. It really was. And it took me till I got home to eat. I did not pick it up at all in the interactions while we were there.
That's amazing. As I hear you talking about that experience, and just trying to find that common denominator, right? Where like you say, here in the United States, you might say, well, the Northeasters are different than the Floridians down south, or those folks who live out in California have a different culture than they do in the Midwest. And it's the same out there as well. But you found that kind of common denominator of our faith and of prayer in ways that you could relate in a common way. Mm-hmm. I just find that so beautiful, such a celebration. And when we drop this podcast, it's going to be the month of celebrating religious sisters of March. And I just can't think of a better way to even kind of put an exclamation on that religious sisters from all parts of the world can gather together and find that common theme in that community.
Yeah. And they also have the same common difficulties, as if you will, within this organization. The reason why I was asked to go, besides being on the board, was that I was a psychologist. And so within this organization, they have 6 hubs, mental health hubs, that they have devised primarily for women religious, but for anyone in their general population. So women religious can go to the hubs for therapy. They have sisters who are trained as therapists. They encounter the same difficulties within their communities as we do within ours.
Absolutely. Well, sister, I'm sure that nobody who's listening to this podcast is going to be surprised, if they don't know already, that we're honoring you in May with our inaugural Outstanding Service Award, you are our very first Saint John Vianney Center employee to receive the Outstanding Service Award. And we're very excited to honor you on May 8th out at the Inn at Villanova University. Thank you for accepting this award in all humility, because I know a lot comes with it, and you're we all know you to be a very humble person. So what does it mean for you to receive an award like this?
Well, first of all, it was a shock. So I found out about it by a letter from David Schellenberger, and like, what is he talking about here? I couldn't figure it out. And I think it was a couple of weeks before I actually saw him, or maybe I called somebody and said, I got this letter. I don't know what this is about. Then they explained it to me, so it was a shock. But it is very humbling, because I've worked at St. John's for 20 years. There's someone, on our staff who's been there, one of the psychiatrists, probably 35 or more. Mm-hmm. And there are a lot of people who have worked there equally as long as I have. So I am very humbled by that. But I would say one of the reasons that I am delighted to accept the reward is that the Sisters of Mercy were founders of Saint John Vianney Center.
Yep.
So I accept the accept the award in the name of the Sisters of Mercy, because we have been there since the foundation. When the Archdiocese of Philadelphia founded Saint John Vianney Center, they asked our community to staff it. And I would say, with the possible exception of about 10 years, there has always been a Sister of Mercy on staff, at least one. I mean, there may have been more. In the beginning, they probably were 3 or 4. So I accept it humbly in the name of the Sisters of Mercy, because I think that even as a young sister myself, I visited out there. So we all know about Saint John Vianney Center, and I think we can be very proud of our contribution to what the center has become.
Well, that leads really into one of my final questions here. And you've seen such a long history of the center's evolution to where we've been and where we are today, and the evolution certainly even in your own practice in the field of behavioral health, I'm sure. What do you see as the center's perhaps most enduring impact, or maybe even its greatest legacy as we think about the last 80 years?
Well, I would see maybe its greatest legacy would be helping people to weave back together again their spiritual and mental health lives. We can tend to compartmentalize, and so I have my prayer life and sacramental life and meditative life and so on, and then I go in and I do my ministry, and and then I fall apart, whatever it might be. We're all of one piece, and so I think being a very spiritual atmosphere, which it is at St. John's, regardless of what religion or faith tradition a staff member follows, still in all, there's a very deep spirituality that is there. And of course, there's a Roman Catholic spirituality as well. But I think the legacy that I see is helping people to weave together all those aspects of their lives so they can go on living healthily. And it helps me to weave it together as well. I think bidden or not bidden, God is present.
100%. Absolutely. So last question, Sister. You've been an inspiration to so many here at the center, the women religious that you've mentored and spoken to over the years, so many. And I know we've got a nice big group of Sisters of Mercy who are coming to honor you on May 8th, and I'm so thrilled about that. But for our listeners who might be feeling, listening to you talk and hearing about the impact of your ministry over the years and how you've kind of blended behavioral health along with the spirituality and that connection, and maybe they're feeling like, how could I do that? How could I do that in my own practical life? Is there one practical step or piece of encouragement that you might offer them today?
Well, definitely making your spiritual life the priority in whatever way, however you practice your faith, having that friendship with God, it has got to be the priority. And if you work from that as the basis, then other things will fall into place.
Well said, and a great note for us to end on. Sister, thank you so much for being on our podcast today. I learned a lot, and I really enjoyed this time with you.
Okay. And Jim, I just want to make one caveat. In case people think that's a picture of me in an old bed, it is not. It's our foundress, Catherine McCauley.
McCauley. So you're not.
So the service of the poor, sick, and ignorant comes through all the time.
So if you're just listening to this, she's referring to Sister, to the foundress, of course, of the Sisters of Mercy. And so you'll have to log into YouTube to see the picture that's over Sister Marcy's left shoulder. So, but thank you so much again, Sister, for joining us. We're all very excited to join you on May 8th and an early Happy Religious Sisters month of March.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
God bless.
God bless you.
Thank you again for joining us today on this episode of Journey to Thrive. Once again, you can find more information about our mission and ministry and more information about Sister Mercedes McCann in the show notes of this episode. If you'd like to support our 80th anniversary celebration, please visit sjvcenter.org/breakfast. We're praying for all of you during this season of Lent. Thanks again for joining us, and may God bless you.